Welcome you to today's facilitation, and we are going to look at Module 3. And what is in Module 3 is reproduction in fungi. So, and at the end of this discussion, our expectation is that students will be able to explain different types of reproduction in fungi. Students also should know the role of the mycelium in the reproduction in fungi, the different types of asexual spores that are found in fungi, and how asexual reproduction occurs in fungi. So these are our expectations, that is the intended learning outcome of this module. Reproduction in fungi is natural. They reproduce naturally, and there are varieties of methods by which fungi reproduce. And also reproduction in fungi, it occurs by spore formation. And the spores are usually formed from the area part of the mycelium. And this is done in a variety of ways. It depends on the type of the fungi. So and the mycelia can either be vegetative or reproductive. That is, there are some mycelia that are just purely for growth, while there are some that are for reproduction in fungi. So reproductive mycelia, they are the ones that are responsible for spore production, and they are usually extend from the medium into the air. That is even the substrate where the fungi grow. So and the fungal spores can be asexual or it could be sexual. And asexual spores are formed by area mycelium of the fungi. So when asexual spores germinate, they become a new organism. And the new organisms through the asexual spores are identical to the parent. That is, they are similar. There's no genetic difference from them because it is more or less like a part of the parent that form the new organisms. While in the sexual spores, that one results from the fusion of a nuclei from two opposite mating strain of species. And the organisms that are formed through these sexual spores, we have genetic characteristics of both parents. So that is, each of them donate gametes, and then they form a zygote, and the zygote eventually develop into new organism. So it means the new organism that is formed will now share or will now bear the characters of the two organisms that form the new ones. So there are different types of asexual spores in fungi. There are different types of asexual spores in fungi, which we are going to look at. The fungi reproduce asexually by spores, as I've said, and the asexual spores are produced through mitosis and cell division. So in sexual reproduction, there is a fusion of nuclei of cells. That is, two nuclei will form, will fuse together, and then they form a new organisms. So then the asexual reproduction is also called somatic or vegetative reproduction, and it does not involve the union of nuclei, cells, or sex organs. So there are different methods by which asexual reproduction could be accomplished in the fungi. One is by fission of somatic cells, and this will yield two similar daughter cells. Two, by budding of somatic cells or spores, and each bud being a small outgrowth of present cell developing into a new individual or organism. This one is found mainly in the yeast. Then it could be through fragmentation or disjointing of the hyphal cells, each fragment becoming a new organism. Then it could also be through spore formation. So when we look at the different types of asexual spores, we have sporangiosperms as one of the asexual spores, and these single cell spore are formed within the sac called sporangia, and this can be found in rhizospores. And then we have avanospores, which are non-motile sporangiospores, and their motility is due to the presence of flagella in them. Another spore type is conidospores, and a conidospore is a unicellular or multicellular spore that is not enclosed in any sac. We find this one mainly in fungus like penicillium. So they have this type of spores, and the conidospores are produced in chain at the end of the conidophore, as you can see in the picture by the left hand side. So they are usually small, they are single cell, and they are called microconidia. Those that are very small and single cell are called microconidia. We have those that are large and multicellular, and those ones are called the macroconidia. So the conidia are formed at the tip or side of a hyphae. So, and as I've given example in penicillium. Then we have other types which include oidia. The singular of oidia is oidum, or what we call arthrospores. And these type of spores are single cell, and they are formed by the jointing of hyphal cells in fungus. So it could also be by fragmentation of a septate hyphae into single slightly thickened cells. And one species that produce this type of spore is coccidiosis. Then we have chlamydospores as one of the type of spores in fungi. And this type of spores are thick wall spores formed as a segment within the hyphae. The chlamydospores are highly resistant to adverse conditions because they have thick wall that enable them to survive any adverse conditions, and they are formed from cells of the vegetative hyphae. So we have an example of this type of fungus that produce this type of spore, chlamydospores, as candida, which is a yeast. So they form this type of spores. Then we have blastospores, and the blastospores are formed by budding, and these spores often come off the parent cell. And as we have mentioned, also yeast also produce this type of spores. So as you can see the diagram, so when the bud are formed, they can fall off from the parent cells, as you can see by the left hand side of this slide. So having talked about the asexual spores, so let us look at the sexual reproduction in fungi. And the sexual reproduction of fungi is by fusion of a compatible nuclei of two parent cells. So, and fungal sexual spores are product of sexual reproduction in fungi. So the sexual reproduction in fungi consists of three phases, which we are going to look at. So one is a haploid nucleus of a donor cell will penetrate the cytoplasm of a recipient cell. So actually here we indicate them as positive and negative because we cannot actually say which one is the male and which one is the female. So but we represent them with positive and negative. The second stage is that the positive and the negative nuclei, they will fuse to form a diploid zygote nucleus. And in the third stage is the process of meiosis. And then the diploid nucleus will give rise to haploid nuclei. So, and that is sexual spores. Then we have different types of sexual spores, which are formed through mitosis. So, and of course, as we know, in a asexual spore, there is no fusion of nuclei of cells, which we have already talked about. So, and as I've said, also the asexual reproduction is also called the somatic or vegetative reproduction, and it does not involve union of two organisms. So, the fusion of somatic cell is the one that yield the two similar daughter cells. So, and a budding of somatic cell or spores, each bud being a small outgrowth of present cell developing into a new individual, and there could be fragmentation. So there could be spore formation too. So then when we look at the types of the different type of sexual spores, so and then we said that the sexual spores are product of fusion of two nuclei. This usually occur frequently in fungi, and it occurs in a smaller number than that of the asexual spores. There are different types of sexual spores, and they are often produced only under special circumstances. Some examples of sexual fungal spores are the following. One, ascospores. So the ascospores are single cell spores too, and they are produced in the circle ascus. If it is plural, we refer to it as asci. So, and there are usually 2 to 8 ascospores in each ascus. That is the number of spores that are found in the enclosed structure that enclose the spores. So there are 2 to 8 depending on the fungus, and they are usually produced by the phylum Ascomycota. So they are the one that produce this type of spores. Then another sexual spores is the basidospores, which is also, they are single cell, and they are usually born on a club-shaped structure. We call it a basidium. The structure is called basidium. So there are usually 4 basidospores per basidium. That is, you can only get 4, unlike the one we have just mentioned that you can get between 2 to 8. So they are only produced by member of the Basidomycota. So it is this phylum that produce the basidospores. Zygospores also are one of the are some of the types of sexual spores that are found in fungi. And these zygospores are thick, they are large, and they are formed when the tips of 2 sexually compatible hyphae or gametangia of certain fungi fuse together. That is when there is fusion of the 2 compatible hyphae. So this is found in mucor. Mucor is a mold. So they form this type of spores, zygospores. Then there is oospores, and the oospores are formed within a special structure that we call ogonium. It is the fertilization of eggs or oosphere by male gametes that form these spores, and it is formed in an antheridium, which is that of the female, and gives rise to oospores. So there are 1 or more oosphere in each ogonium. That is either 1 or you find 2, not more than 2 in each ogonium. So in conclusion about the reproduction in fungi, so we have looked at the sexual reproduction, which we say it occurs by fusion of the compatible nuclei of 2 hyphae, and the 2 haploid through the joining of 2 cells will fuse, and their protoplast will fuse together and enable the 2 haploid to fuse together. So diffusion results in the diploid nucleus, and the diffusion is immediately followed by the cell division. So then the meiosis will now take place, and of course we know what meiosis is all about. So, and that is reduction division, and then the sex organelles of fungi are the gametangia that produce sex gamete. So, and after this formation, is then different form Antellidium algonia. So they form different form of Antellidia or Ugonia. So with this one, we come to the end of the reproduction in fungi. Thank you very much and have a nice day.